students who are joining us for this Zoom session. The way this is going to work is if you would like to ask a question to Chris at any point, if you could click on the raise your hand button on the Zoom function, and then we'll pick someone from there and you'll be unmuted, and then you'll be asked to put your question to Chris. And for anyone who's watching us live out there on Facebook and YouTube, you can post your message in the comments box, and we'll try to answer as many of those as we can. So without any further ado, let's say hello to Chris. Chris, very warm welcome. Thank you so much for making time to do this for us. It's really, really appreciated. So first up, let's ask how you are. How are you coping with the lockdown?
All right, yeah. With all things considered, I mean, it's it's been a very difficult thing for everyone to adjust to, and it's quite weird seeing the days fly by at the same time as I'm feeling like they sometimes drag out. And but it's, as we were kind of saying before, there's been the silver lining. I'm getting to spend a lot of time with my family. I've got a little boy who's going to be 1 this Sunday, so it's been good having time with him. And just trying to make the most of it. I mean, the strangest thing for us is that we were supposed to be on tour right now. We've got a new album that's due out very soon, and it's been a chaotic time where it just, unfortunately, that hasn't panned out the way that we thought it was going to do for this year. So just having to adjust to that, get used to being at home instead of out on the road, and just make the most of the time any way that we can.
In terms of you as a musician, I mean, obviously it's great to have that downtime and spend it with your family. How has this affected your kind of routine, as in a musical sense?
I guess when I'm in kind of normal everyday musician mode, one of the things I love at least is not having routine. It's usually quite chaotic, and it's usually quite different, and every day is quite different. And unfortunately now it feels like every day is a little bit the same. And it's not the same now. It's just taking that effort to make sure that things are different, to kind of incorporate new things into the day and to kind of keep busy. But the thing usually is, we're always in a different place, different bed every night, in different hotels and different, cities and different gigs and different venues, different people. What keeps it really exciting and interesting. So it's been a little bit strange just being in one place for this long. It's been a while since we've done that.
Okay, let's rewind a little bit, because I think it'd be really interesting for the students here to hear the story of the band and how it formed. So this was something that was born out of your time at the RNCM, and not too long ago you were in the same shoes as the guys who are in the room with us right now, studying through your music degree. So paint a picture for us. How did the band meet? How did it come together, and how did it grow during your time at the college?
Well, I was studying classical piano at the college, so it was from 2002 until 2007, I think it was. And at the same time, I met a lot of different people and just tried to get into as many ensembles as I could. And whilst I was studying classical, I've always been interested in rock and dance music and electronica, and always wanted to be in a band, always wanted to play in an ensemble. So, I took the opportunities I could, but then luckily, I got to meet people that were interested in similar sorts of things. And, I met quite a few different drummers and bassists and started playing in trios. But it was when I met Rob through a friend of a friend. Rob was studying at the college as well. And, we started doing some playing together, but in different bands. And at the time, I didn't even really know Nick. I think Nick and Rob had been close friends for years before that, but I met Nick through just playing, gigs in Manchester. We knew a lot of people at the time who, if there wasn't a venue that we could already go and try and play at, friends just put events on. We used to do stuff at Sandbar. That was a big one. I think that's still there down the road, isn't it? So, we used to put on nights there. Friends of ours, we used to run regular weekly events, and just, wherever we could put on nights, even in the JCR that existed back when I was at college, we put gigs on up there. And, once that kind of happened, there was it's a small enough city, but, big enough things going on and lots going on. So, after a while, we just got to see each other. We got to chatting about getting, some playing together. And as soon as the three of us were in the room together, we just knew it was working. It just kind of clicked. And, we didn't really talk about it much. We've never really explicitly sort of said a lot of these things or chatted too much about them. We've just got on with it and played. And, somehow it's ended up where it is now. Yeah.
Okay, so let's just fast forward it then. So after forming at college, you started to write and record, and then I guess the kind of big moment for you guys was in 2014 when the Mercury Prize nomination came around for the album V 2.0. Can you just explain to us how that changed things for the band?
Well, I think before that, I mean, we've obviously got a jazz influence. You know, we're a piano trio at the core. You know, it's piano, bass, and drums. But we've always kind of come at the music from other angles. You know, we've incorporated jazz equally as well as electronica, rock, classical. You know, anything that we can kind of bring individually that we can then combine in the band. So something like the Mercury Prize. I mean, it's been known for years. You know, as one of those events and one of those awards where it looks at loads of different kinds of music. It's not just focused on one genre. It's not just focused on one type of musician, and it's very diverse and very open-minded in a lot of ways as to what kind of music's incorporated in it. So it was really nice for us to be involved in that because, you know, it definitely showed a lot of people at the time our music that otherwise probably wouldn't have found it. Especially with, you know, we could get into deep conversations about it, but we've talked a lot about with people in the past about labels and genres and how useful they actually are. And, you know, whilst they might have the time and the place to be used, they often isolate people from music and they isolate people from art. You know, there are people that we know, they said, you know, to their friend, oh, there's this band or, you know, great jazz band. The friend might be like, oh, I don't like jazz. Or if they said it's electronica, they might be like, oh, I don't like electronic music. So in that way, it kind of just put the music out there. People saw it, people heard about it. It started to kind of make a bit more of a reputation for us, help build a reputation. And around the same time, you know, we had quite a lot of support from people like Giles Peterson, Jamie Cullum, music, you know, some people like that who were kind of really getting on board with what we were doing. And yeah, just really kind of boosted our kind of reputation at the time.
Okay, great, thank you. I'm just going to ask one more question, and then I think it'd be time to open it up to the floor. So if the students in the room can be on your blocks and be thinking about what you'd like to ask Chris next. I'm really interested in how your trio functions in terms of composition and what the writing process looks like for you. So maybe you can explain how that works.
Sure, it's not the easiest question to answer because it's very dependent on what track we're working on at the time. Depends on what we're trying to say with the music. But the key thing is we try and be very diplomatic. We try and be very equal. Everybody's voice is important. Everybody's ideas are important. And you know, we've really made right from the beginning that a point of there being no leader. Nobody's the boss of the band. Nobody's directing it. It's and there was a track on V2.0 called Murmuration. And the whole idea of that, we took the inspiration from seeing flocks of birds, which is where the word murmuration comes from. And the idea that they can look like they're moving as one giant thing, one, you know, thing that's bigger than the composite parts of these individual birds. And they can move together and it looks seamless. It looks like it's planned or choreographed or like there's somebody directing it. And yet it seems to be that it's just this interaction between all of them that makes that happen. It's not individually led, it's group led, and it's group sort of thinking. And you know, we wanted to kind of approach the music in the same way. So very often what will happen is there'll be a small idea brought to the band by one person. So it could be anything like a short beat, it could be a bass line, it could be just some chords, it could be a more abstract kind of idea, you know, something that we're just trying to think about expressing, or an exercise that we want to try messing about with. And then we'll just play around with it until, you know, we start feeling like it's actually achieving the idea that we, you know, that we came to the band with. So if there's a particular emotion, you know, we'll work on how can we enhance that, how can we think about conveying that to the people that are going to listen to this music. And it's a difficult process because, like I was saying, you know, everybody's ideas are important, and that means that even if we, you know, one of us or two of us think that the other person's idea is completely stupid, we still try it. You know, it's a process that until we've gone through that, we're not guaranteed that that's going to be the wrong thing to do. And you never know where those kind of paths might lead as well. So, you know, it's been able to get rid of preconceived ideas, get rid of any sort of judgment as best as we can, which is difficult. You know, it's difficult not to let those thoughts and those voices kind of kick in. And then just to try everything, you know, go with absolutely everything that we can. And then usually forms quite naturally. Then we'll all start to find that we're following a similar path, and we know the direction that the music's going kind of towards as a final idea, and then we just reinforce it. If there's anything in there that doesn't feel essential, we'll just get rid of it. We make sure that we're trying to. It's a bit like with a good argument. You try and say it in as few words as possible. You don't need to say too much if you want to just try and get a really clear point across. And I think that's quite important with art. If you're trying to express, we're not necessarily trying to express specific stories, but we're trying to convey some emotion or some feeling, or perhaps a feeling of traveling, or like a journey, like you're going somewhere with us when we play. And I think to do that, you need to try and be as clear as you possibly can.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Let's open this up to you guys now then. Has anyone got anything they'd like to ask at this point? Don't be shy. I think Matt's going to unmute whoever it is. Okay, so we're just going to see if we've got any questions from our audience. Don't let them get in before you guys. You're in the top seats in the room. Okay, we got one from Witz. Hi, Witz.
Hello.
Hi, how you doing?
Hi. Yeah, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you got about managing to fund and set up like the first album you did, because of course you just came out of college and you had a good band together. But how did you practically get it together to create an album, and especially the financial part of that?
Sure. I mean, early on, it's trying to use whatever kind of connections you can find, and trying to use the opportunities that you have. I mean, fanfares, when we recorded that album, we actually funded ourselves just by finding somewhere, a studio that we could afford, that, compared to the sort of studios we've recorded in since, was pretty basic, bare bones sort of stuff, but it did the job. It had a piano that we needed. The other guys obviously had their instruments, and it had space where we had a good engineer that who we could rely on, and then we just funded that ourselves. But luckily we had connections through playing in the scene. Like I was saying before, we had friends who organized nights and gigs and events, and one of those was Matt Halsall, who I don't know if anyone's heard the name, or he's big Manchester name. He's set up a label called Gondwana years ago, and we signed with him. He was interested in the music, and we knew him as a friend and part of that music scene. So he offered to sign us, and be able to release that initial album. So there is an element of luck, but I mean, what I've said to a lot of people with that idea of luck, it's trying to make sure you're ready for it. We've definitely had luck come along our way, but it's just working hard, doing what you can whilst you can, and just trying to make the most of any opportunities that come along. I think there's a lot of pressure to feel like, you make a record, you want it to be as good as you can possibly make it, but do that in the moment that you're in, right in that moment. That's still what we do now. There are people who spend months in studios and travel, around the other side of the world. On this last record, we went to a studio in Leeds. It was actually Castlefield, just outside of Leeds, and it was beautiful studio, good gear, but cheap. It was nothing fancy, nothing flashy. We've got mates who are in bands that have travelled to LA and gone to studios and all sorts, and it's fine. It's whatever suits them. But for us, we just wanted to make sure that the gear was right. There was a good piano. There was nice space. It was residential. We wanted somewhere we could stay and we could have, as few distractions as possible. And like I said, I've just had my boy's nearly one, but at the time I just had a baby boy, and it can be a big distraction. So, finding somewhere we could have space just to think. So think about what you need right now in that moment. Don't worry about, if it's going to be the most polished record you make at the time, or, there's time to keep expanding. I mean, the first album, Steve Guy's here, we did some recording back with Steve years and years ago, where, it was working as friends. We just worked together, put some records together. I think it was it 1 or 2 nights of recording? I don't remember. And, we did what we could, and it was great. But, I was then, burning copies of the CD myself at home and printing out covers, cutting them out by hand and sticking them in CD cases and trying to flog those. It's like, you do what you can at the time. You do what you need to do. And as much as that album definitely didn't sell many copies, it was massively important to record. It was really useful as an experience, as a learning experience, but also just to give me that confidence of we can do this. it's important that, whatever path you want to go on, you've got to take that first step and get on the ladder and keep working your way upwards. And, it doesn't matter how long it takes, just, keep taking each step, whenever the opportunity is there.
Cool.
Okay, thanks for your question there, Vitz. Are you back in the Netherlands now? Are you home and okay?
Yes, I'm still stuck here, yes.
All right. Okay. Okay, it's nice to see you. Okay, we've got some questions from our Facebook audience, which we'll take in turn, and then we'll come back into our Zoom room, where we've got a couple of questions there as well. So let's do a question first from Isabel. So Isabel asks, how important is the role of production and recording techniques in terms of bringing your music, a new album, to life?
It's massively important, absolutely. I mean, we tour with a sound engineer, Joe Reiser, who he's been touring with us for years now, but he comes into the studio with us. He comes into a lot of rehearsals with us and acts as that kind of other pair of ears, that's listening from a different perspective. And we also work with Brendan Williams, who's a great producer, studio producer, who's been working with Low 4 Studios. I don't know if anyone's heard of Low 4. They've had some troubles with being able to, keep their current studio, which is where we recorded Humdrum Star, but hopefully they found a new place. And, they work very closely with us in thinking about what we're actually trying to achieve with the record and thinking about the overall sound that we're trying to put out at the end of it. We're very keen on making sure the music feels acoustic. It's acoustic instruments that we play, and as much as we might incorporate some effects or we might incorporate electronic ideas, even just in the kind of techniques that we play acoustically, we're really keen on making sure that the finished product conveys as much of the ideas and the emotions that we're trying to achieve. And it's difficult on a record. When we play live, you're in the room with the audience, and we feed off them, they feed off us, and there's a lot more atmosphere and energy. And when it's a record, it's sometimes difficult to stop it from just being quite a two-dimensional thing. People put that record in a CD player or they stream it on Spotify or whatever, and it's just not the same as that live experience. And we're really keen on trying to find how we can incorporate some of that energy to the record. And a big part of that comes through with the production. It's I can't think of a good analogy, but it's like the way that you try and enhance those feelings, enhance those emotions, because for us they're very vivid. Those things are very real, as I'm sure it is for anybody when they're performing. They feel those things a lot stronger than the audience would, unless you exaggerate that bit more, unless you really consider how you're trying to convey that to somebody else and not just to yourself. So yeah, absolutely. We work very closely with them. It's been the same team since V 2.0, and we've really worked even more so on that on the last album.
Great, thanks for your question, Isabel. Next question we've got is from Matt Howarth. And Matt would like to ask, how did the decision to rescore Koyaanisqatsi, I hope I said that right, come about?
Very close. It took us a while to practice saying that, Koyaanisqatsi. Well, we were asked to do a project for Home, the cinema and theatre complex in Manchester, and they approached us asking if we'd write some music for a silent film. So we originally found a film called A Page of Madness, a Japanese film that was a great film, really quite dark and quite strange, and we thought it'd be a really good one to write music to. Unfortunately, we couldn't get the rights to it. So Rob suggested Koyaanisqatsi, thinking, it's a great film, it's got some great imagery, but we knew they already had the score, the Philip Glass score, and we thought perhaps we wouldn't be able to be allowed to do that. We wouldn't be able to get the rights to do that. And luckily, our management and people got in touch and found out if it was okay, and they said yeah. So it was for the project originally, but then we felt that after the amount of work it took to kind of score that, this continuous hour and 20 minutes of music, I think I break for about 32 bars in the entire time. It's pretty exhausting, and it took a lot of work composing it just to think, well, let's do we did 2 nights of performances at home, and we thought just feels strange not to kind of keep going with that. So we used that then after that as a project that we were able to go out and tour when we weren't touring the album, whatever album was out at the time. We just made sure we were able to kind of keep going out and play, because we love playing music. And it was a very different project. It gave us a different way of thinking about music. When we write an album, we purposefully make sure that we've got as few restrictions and limitations as we can, and we just write the music we want to make. Whereas with the film, you know, you're starting from something that's already created, and you're taking your direction from something else that was somebody else's vision, you know, somebody else's ideas and somebody else's mindset that had gone into that creation. So it was a very different way for us to work, which was good fun.
Great, thanks for your question, Matt. Okay, we've got a question from Jim next. Jim would like to ask, what was performing at the Royal Albert Hall like for the band?
Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah, I mean, it's that whole tour was a lot of fun for us. I mean, every tour is great, but you know, it's a strange one. We love playing all different kinds of venues, and we're very lucky with the music that we play that we can do that. So it was a good tour to be on, where we were playing one night, you know, small little kind of basement clubs and you know, small jazz clubs or dance venues, and then the next day we played at the Albert Hall, and it was just mind blowing to know that we were there and to see, you know, a sold out crowd and have that kind of atmosphere of feeling that many people in the room with us. It's, yeah, really powerful. And it's one of those things, you know, it's the sort of thing that you dream about when you're a kid, you know, that you might one day play somewhere like that. And, you know, for it to actually become a reality was pretty special, definitely.
Great, that's amazing, thank you. We've got a question from Laurel, who's actually in the room with us here. Hi, Laurel. I think you're going to be unmuted now, and you can put your question to Chris.
Cool. Thank you. Hello, Chris. I just wanted to ask, do you perform a lot outside, and do you find that you have to give a different energy in performing outside rather than in a more enclosed space? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think we do play a lot of festivals, and you know, we play a lot of those that'll be, you know, outside, just in the middle of a field quite often. And it's like I was saying before, we tour with the sound engineers. So one of the benefits is we've got somebody who's at the front listening from the audience's perspective. And you know, we've always said he is the fourth member of the band. You know, he makes what we're doing as clear in its kind of conviction and its idea and its delivery that you know, that we want to kind of deliver. He makes that possible so that the audience hear that. And in terms of the energy, it just completely depends on the crowd. You know, we've played festivals where, you know, I can think of a couple of jazz festivals where it's been quite a tame audience, and it's been quite, everyone's sat in the sun just having a few beers and everyone's quite relaxed. And then you get the opposite, where it's everybody up on the feet and it's the middle of the night, and you know, everyone's having a proper pie. And it's the same indoor. You know, we'll play tiny venues where you can almost hear people breathing, and they've been incredibly respectful. I can think of times when we've been in Japan, and it's, you know, part of the culture there, you know, they're very respectful. They wait till the end of the track, and then they'll, you know, clap for us. And then we get the opposite, where we've got people that have maybe had one too many beers trying to sing along with it. And it's instrumental music, but they want to sing along. You know, it's great. But you know, it's nice to have that variation, and it does make us play differently. I don't know if it's something that you can kind of put into words. It's not just a case of, it's not so obvious always, but it does make you feel differently. You do react differently. And it's the same for the crowds though. You know, I'm sure there are times when they react differently to us because of whatever mindset we're in that day. So yeah, it's a complete give and take. You know, we feed off them, they feed off us, and that in turn makes the gig go the way it goes. Yeah.
Chris,
thank you.
Thanks for your question, Laurel. That's great to hear the story about people singing along to your instrumental music. I don't know.
Right, you know, he was just at the corner, like literally 2 paces away from it, just off stage, and I thought, you know, I wanted to get him up on stage with us. Yeah.
I don't know if this has ever happened to you guys. I remember vividly going to a Snarky Puppy gig at the Ritz about 2 years ago, and I was watching people dancing to a tune in 7/8, which is kind of a whole new experience.
It's when they start clapping 7/8 as well. That's a good one.
got a question from your old friend Steve Guy, who's in the room with us. So sorry, Steve, I didn't mean old as in, I meant old friend, old acquaintance. So here, without saying anything else, I'll just hand over to Steve.
Yeah, hello. I just wondered, although you're probably aware that I've been put up to this question, I wonder how the band came by its name.
Yeah, so we found this in the room that we rehearsed in originally. We found this. It was a prop that had been used for an opera in college, as far as I remember. So they had like a silent auction of all these random different things. I'm sure someone said there was even like an armchair that belonged to the principal at the time, or something weird like that. All sorts of mad objects. and one of them was this thing that looked like, I think it was supposed to be a magpie, but it looked like a penguin, and we took the inspiration from there. But the truth is, we at the time, like I said already, we're very aware that jazz is an influence that's played a role in the shaping of the band, and the important thing was we didn't want to follow those kind of traditions that are often in jazz where the band is named after one of the individuals. And we wanted to make it very clear right from the outset, right from anybody even just hearing the name of the band, that that's where it is. It's a band. It's not one person with a couple of people supporting. And we just wanted to make sure that we avoided those kind of traditions, pick something crazy. All band names are weird, aren't they? When you think about every single band you can think of, they're all a bit weird. So we went with GoGo Penguin, and it stuck. And now we get asked quite a lot of the time, where does the name come from?
So now we know. Thanks a lot, Steve. Yep. Okay, we're going to head to Maria next. Maria's in the room with us. Maria, you've got a question for Chris.
Hi. I was just going to ask about changing from Gondwana to Blue Note Records. Did you feel any differences going from a small label to a bigger label, and did it impact your creative process or expectations your audience has from you?
It's definitely changed things for us. Not so much creatively, I wouldn't say. I mean, Matt was very supportive in, wanting us to make the music that we made. There's always going to be differences of opinion in the kind of making of a record between management, between labels, and between us individually even. But the key thing was we had a lot of support from Gondwana. We had a lot of support, and still have now, with this latest record from Blue Note. And they're very keen. We had Nico, who's the head of Blue Note in France. He came over when we were doing this last recording, same as the previous ones, and he kept reinforcing the idea of saying, make the music you want to make. Don't worry about experimenting or pushing boundaries. Do what you can, do what you want to do. Don't feel any pressure from the label. So it's been great from that perspective. But the big thing that changed, I mean, Matt, Gondwana is now, the reputation has increased. We go around the world and we find people in Japan, and we've been in Istanbul and heard people talk about Gondwana. It's got a good name for itself. But Blue Note, I mean, they've got a legacy of music that's been going for years, and it's, they're a big label. They've got a reach of places all around the world that just meant that we could get that music out to other people. In the same way as I was saying with the Mercury Prize, it got that music to audiences that we originally weren't able to ourselves, and that perhaps with other labels we might not have done. And with Blue Note, they've been able to get us a lot more followers in Japan in particular. We've been doing a lot in Europe, and it's just reinforced that. And then also in America, we've toured the US quite a lot now, and Blue Note was definitely a part in helping us get to that point.
Okay, thanks, Maria. We're going next to our Facebook audience. We've got some more questions out there, Chris. The first one up is William. William asks, and I'm just reading this direct, okay? You're hitting those tents like it ain't no thing on a Hopopono. What's the biggest interval you can play on the piano?
Well, I can do C to E with my right hand. I can do C to F sharp with my left hand because I broke those two fingers years and years and years ago. So that hand's actually a little bit bigger. But yeah, so C to F sharp with my left full stretch.
So your advice to our audience is, if you want to play larger intervals, break your fingers.
I wouldn't go as far as that, no. I think just, keep practicing. Don't break any fingers.
All right. Next, we've got a question from Gary. Gary Schubert asks, how would you feel about writing for other instruments, especially trombone?
Yeah, I know.
Gary's a trombone player.
It's nice to hear Gary Schubert chiming in. Writing for trombone, yeah, absolutely. As long as it's Gary Schubert coming and playing, definitely. Yeah.
All right, you obviously know this guy, so we'll move on from there. Okay, so we've got a question here. What is your most driving factor in creativity? I.e., do you have? Sorry, this is Jennifer's question. What is your most driving factor in creativity? Do you have times where you find you lose impetus or creative motivation? And if so, do you find your best? How do you find it best to overcome that as a group?
I think it's difficult to say as a group. I mean, we definitely, like every musician or like any artist, you go through phases of things being really good, things feeling really creative, and ideas come in, and then other days where you just feel like it's never going to come back again, you know, and you're never going to have another decent idea of your instrument ever again. And, you know, it still happens. You know, it's a tough thing to get used to. But I think the key thing, one of the things that I've found is I always write down an idea that comes to me. So it's difficult because sometimes that's in the middle of the night. Sometimes it's, you know, when you're out on the road or, you know, like on tour or anything, you know, the key thing is write it down, because it's better than just having it stuck in your head. You know, if you get that idea out and written and it's just somewhere else that you can either come back to it, you can develop it, or you can just forget about it. Keeps your mind kind of clear. And yeah, I think it's a tricky one. I don't know if there's any particular thing that really helps with creativity other than trying to be as open-minded as you possibly can. I know that sounds maybe a little bit obvious, but just always keeping open-minded, ready for when any ideas come along. I've heard so many different musicians and artists say that inspiration comes at, you know, the times that you least expect it, and it can come from anywhere. You know, it's not necessarily just by listening to the music that you get musical ideas. It could be from something completely abstract. It could be from a place that you visit. It could be from something you read. And I think keeping your eyes and ears open to all of those things, and then trying to be honest about them. I think that's another big one. Be honest and don't be afraid of trying something and it not working. You know, a lot of these ideas, like we said, with the way that we make music, we start with, like with this last album, we perhaps had maybe 40 or 50 different ideas that were fragments or tiny little ideas or sketches, some from years ago, some from right now, you know, some from whilst we were literally just starting to, you know, work on rehearsals. We pared that down and we've ended up with 10 tracks on the album. And, you know, it takes a lot of time just kind of getting rid of the ideas that don't work, but not being afraid of that, not being afraid of those ideas just being something else. Maybe they'll come back another day. Maybe they just weren't the right thing right then.
Okay, thanks for your question, Jennifer. We're going to move back into the room now. We've got a question from Toby. So, Toby, you're up next.
Hi there. When did GoGo Penguin become your main and only income stream? And if it is, and what did it take to get to that point? And were you doing anything on the side to fund what you were doing with the band and to get to that point and live off it, I guess, as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's probably been, I don't know, it's been probably close to about 5 years now where it's been just the sole income. And it's taken a long time to get to that point. You know, before that point, we were doing everything we could. You know, I mean, I used to love doing a lot of teaching. It's definitely one thing that I miss now is, you know, I don't have the time to really focus on that. And I don't think it's fair to students when I'm not able to be kind of consistent. I think that's really important with studies, that, you know, it's consistent and you get that feedback and that dialogue between a teacher and a pupil. And unfortunately, I'm not really around for that. But I used to do a lot of teaching, used to play in function bands, used to play weddings, used to do any gig that came along, you know, just keep busy. But again, in the same way, you know, there was a part of that was definitely to try and make, you know, a living as a musician, to make income and do it through music. Another part of that is, you know, it's just helpful to keep your mind open to where these ideas might come from. You know, you might be playing a function gig, but it might suddenly bring some ideas that are perhaps a little bit more independent and something personal that you can then put into your own project. And you never know where those things could come from or could lead to. So I think the big thing was staying confident, staying realist at the same time as staying confident. So, you know, being aware that, yes, you need to make a living. Yes, you need to earn money and you need to pay the rent, you need to pay the bills and so on. But at the same time, be prepared to make those sacrifices, because that's what it will take. You know, you need to make sacrifices along the way, whether that's with time, whether it's with money, whether it's with friends. You know, these things have to be made if you're going to keep absolutely focused on that goal at the end of it. And that's what we did, and luckily it's paid off.
Thanks, Toby. Great advice there, Chris. Thank you. We've got a question again from our audience. So this is a question from Sam. Sam Healy asks, how did the ending of 1% come about?
Right, yeah. It's nice to hear from Sam Healy. I haven't seen him in a long time, but yeah, so the ending of 1% was through the ideas of, like, we're all into quite a lot of electronic music, and particularly, you know, people like Aphex Twin and Square Pusher, and they use a lot of glitch techniques and glitch effects and things that, you know, stutter effects on drums and things like that. And we started thinking, it'd be interesting to try some of those things out. I mean, we've pushed that further over the album since then, but that was kind of the initial one where we thought, is there a way that we can create the effect of, maybe like a CD skipping and do that acoustically, do that live. So, we took some inspiration from actual, the sound of like the CDs that were scratched and broken and listened to, those kind of skips. And then we work a lot with, Rob works a lot with Ableton. I'm kind of more into using Reason. It's the one that feels more comfortable for me to use. And we play around with these things to be able to develop these sort of techniques, listen to how they sound, and then see if we can emulate them. So a lot of that stuff, we think about like some of the stuff we've done on the latest album. There's tracks like Cora, where I'm doing some kind of muted stuff that's to try and make the piano sound a bit like a synth. These things come from listening to those electronic ideas, maybe building them electronically, use Ableton or Reason or whatever DAW or software you want to use, and listen to the sound of it, and then see how far you can push the acoustic instrument to be able to create that and to be able to kind of capture that energy. So that's what we did with 1%. And we still play that tune now. It's a lot of fun to play, and it's nice to be able to kind of revisit that on gigs. But yeah, we've kept that idea in mind. How do we incorporate these things? How far can you push the instrument? And, coming from a classical background, it's not far away from, when you look at people like John Cage and some of the composers that did prepared techniques, trying to extend what the instrument's capable of. It's kind of just an extension of that, but looking at maybe different genres and different styles as inspiration for the sound of that music.
Okay, we've got about 10 minutes left, guys. So if there's anyone else in the Zoom room here who would like to ask something, then now's your time. Whilst you're thinking about that, I've got a question coming in from Dan Malone. And Dan would like to ask, what are your biggest musical influences, particularly in jazz, when you were growing up?
Well, in jazz, the first person I really got introduced to, well, the first two, was Oscar Peterson and Keith Jarrett. And it was through my old maths teacher from school. So it was weird that I got quite a lot of my inspirations and influences passed on to me through teachers as well as friends at school. And she basically heard me playing piano. She heard I was, at the time, I was just playing classical. I'd never really gone into jazz. And it kind of blew my mind hearing something like the Colne concert, Keith Jarrett, and hearing that was just hugely improvised. Maybe there were ideas and themes he was basing things on, but that was a really new concept to me. And then the big one after that was Espeon and Svensson Trio. It's been mentioned a lot in press about the band and about, our inspirations, but EST were huge inspiration, and Espeon and Svensson particularly for me as a pianist. It was really listening to him that made me think I can play piano in a band. And that was a really big turning point, because before that, I started learning electric bass just so I could play in bands at school, because I wanted to be able to play with other musicians, but piano didn't really fit in when you're trying to play Marilyn Manson and Nine Inch Nails and loads of metal and rock and stuff. No one wanted the piano in that. So I played bass, but then, piano kind of made me think, there it is, that's how I can start doing that. I can play with other musicians and I can still do what I really love and play the instrument that I'm really passionate about. And apart from that, inspirations, it's difficult. I got into a lot of rock through listening to the music that my mom listened to as a kid. When I was a kid, she'd be putting Led Zeppelin, Jethro Tull and things like that on in the house. So that was, a big influence in getting me into rock music. And then hip hop, getting into like Tribe Called Quest, Beastie Boys, Farside, things like that. And electronic music in particular. Since being a kid, I had an Atari ST that I used to hook up to a couple of MIDI keyboards and try and write tunes that sounded like Underworld and Prodigy, having no idea what kind of setup those guys actually had and how ridiculously complex it was compared to a kid playing on an Atari. And, wondering why I couldn't make it sound the same. And then thinking, well, it's probably partly because of that. But, that was a big one. I love that kind of music. Dance music like that, that's been one of the biggest influences in trying to incorporate some of that into the band.
Okay, great, thank you. We've got one more and then we're going to start to wrap this up. So I've got a question next from Mark. Mark Hawkswell asks, what do you do to relax when you're on tour?
When we're on tour, I shouldn't say that, enjoying a drink, that's probably one of them. We do all sorts. We've been quite lucky on some of the tours recently. We've been able to do a couple of bus tours when we've been around Europe. and I've got a Nintendo Switch, so we hook that up in the bus and we play FIFA, and that's a good way of relaxing. And then usually, I mean, we tour a lot where it's literally one gig one day after another, and it's very difficult to be able to find any sort of time in between that. So, you know, you'll do personal things. I like to read quite a lot, so I'll take a bunch of books on tour with me and sit and have time to do that. And then on those occasions when you get that day off, it's just, you know, get out and see the cities that we're in. That's the main way of relaxing, really. It's, you know, we're very lucky that we get to travel because of the music that we play. And yeah, some of the most relaxing stuff is just being able to kind of get some recommendations from locals, you know, what we can go and see in the places that we are. Just have a look around, travel, see some new things and meet some new people.
Okay, thank you. Chris, let's talk about the new album. So it's due to be released next week, the 12th of June. So tell us a little bit about that. What can we look forward to?
Well, I think if anybody knows our kind of music already, you know, hopefully it'll still be recognizable as GoGo Penguin. I think there's a lot in there that's still our character. And I think, you know, we've made it a self-titled album and people have been asking us why we did that. But I think the main reason is with previous albums, we felt that there was a title that kind of explained or described the works as a whole, all of the tracks as a whole. And with this one, we couldn't find something that felt appropriate and like it really described all of that music in one go, except for GoGo Penguin, because it just felt like it was us. You know, there's less focus on, even though we've never made a point of it with other tracks in the past on other albums, there's less point of specific stories influencing the tunes, more than it's been just our experiences or influences or emotions and feelings at the time that we wrote. And there's a lot more of that. It's very personal. It's very, you know, we've all gone through different things and different experiences, some, you know, really big highs, like me having a child. It's been a beautiful experience, but there's been some really heavy lows as well. And, you know, we've just tapped into that, tried to be honest and face up to all of that and accept all of it and bring all of that into the music that we've made. So GoGo Penguin felt like the right description for it. And there's definitely that DNA still in there. There's that character, but we've just tried to push it as far as we possibly can. We had a lot more time last year to kind of work on the album than we have in the past. You know, we've usually gone from literally touring straight into doing another recording and back to touring. And with this time, you know, we had some time off where we could actually just take some time away from music and clear our minds and have some more life experience, you know, just as people, not just as musicians. And then more time to get in the studio together and write and rehearse and record. And we've just tried to incorporate every single idea that we could and test it to its limits, push what we could do as musicians and keep pushing each other. You know, there became a bit of a joke, like for some of the stuff that I've played on it, there's like, ended up being a bit of a joke about we'd be working on a track and somebody would come up with another melodic idea or a riff or something and just go, can you play it at the same time? And just keep adding layers on layers on layers and adding more and more ideas in there. And yeah, I think it's the closest we've come to kind of really expressing what we've wanted to as a band. And fingers crossed we can keep going on that path in the future. I mean, we've got a difficult couple of years, at least a couple of years, you know, with everything that's going on right now. It's going to be a while before we're out gigging again. It's going to be probably a while before we go and record again. So fingers crossed there'll be more that we can keep working on and more of a path that we can keep walking down in the future. But I think this is the closest we've got to expressing ourselves the way we want to at the moment.
Well, I'm sure we all very much look forward to that release next week and hearing the self-titled album. I've got one final question for you, which is kind of a two-parter, really. So the first part is, looking back on your time as a student at the RNCM, what would you consider to be the most valuable lessons you learned whilst you're a student that are now being applied in your professional life? And then as a kind of follow on from that, if you could give some advice to the current students, what would that piece of advice be? Right,
well, I think probably the thing that comes to mind the most and the thing that I think is probably the best experience I had was a little bit what I've already said, which is take every opportunity that you get. You know, when those things come along, you know, I was very keen on playing with other musicians. So whenever I heard that someone needed an accompanist, I got in there and I played the music. And often it was music I didn't want to play, but, you know, the experience of working with those people, I think has taught me a lot. You know, it helped me to have empathy when I'm playing music with others, to listen to the way that they want to play, to take direction from them and try and take that direction in a kind of subconscious way. And I think that's helped in working with a band where now we don't have a leader, we don't have anybody who's directing it. You feed off each other subconsciously. You know, you can pick up on these tiny little things where you can hear the way that somebody's playing something a certain way, and it directs the music. You know, you're more sensitive to those things. And I think that came through, you know, working with as many musicians as I could. Everybody's different, everyone's individual, and everyone has a different approach and different character. And it's important to kind of learn to to understand that and appreciate that, as well as your own ideas and your own mindset and your own approach to music. And I think that was definitely one of the things that I took the most from my experience at college. And in terms of advice, I mean, I think the big one would be just don't ever lose focus on the thing that you actually want, the thing that you really want. Like I said before, I think it was to Toby, wasn't it, saying, you know, be realist. Don't be afraid, and be honest, and be realist. There'll be things that you need to do. And obviously, you know, I'm not saying, you know, to be wild or erratic. There've been risks that I've taken that different people, whether it be, well, she's my wife now, but whether it was my girlfriend or whether it was my parents, they've always supported me, but I'm sure they thought that's a pretty big risk that I'm taking. But sometimes those are necessary. And it's just always having that thing at the end of the, you know, at the end of the path, thinking that's what I'm going for, that's what I'm going to do. And as long as you're honest and you know, you're not afraid of knowing when you're not good at something, knowing when you're missing something. If you're not practicing enough, the only person who can really tell you that and it mean anything is yourself, I think. You know, you can have as many teachers or people you respect say that to you, but if you know you're not doing enough, that's what matters. You've got to do something about that. And it's just keeping going, you know, keep your mind open, keep your eyes open, and just keep pushing and trying to be accepting of what other people want to maybe do musically, see what you can take from that, see what ideas you can take from that, and share as well. You know, if you see people that have got an idea and you think that they need help, try and do that. We had a lot of help along the way. You know, we've had a lot of good friends who, like I say, put events on, put gigs on. Without those early gigs, I don't think we'd be where we are right now. You know, it was a huge help having support from people like that, people who made things happen when perhaps they wouldn't have happened otherwise. And I think, you know, if you're in an opportunity to do that, step up and do it, because, you know, it all comes around.
Great, thank you very much, Chris. You reminded me there of something you said a little bit earlier about being lucky and working hard. Certainly, in my own experience, I find the harder I work, the luckier I get.
Yeah,
and this, I think there's a truth in that. Actually, there's no substitute, is there, for the graft. It's great to hear that kind of coming back from someone who's been through your training and is now, you know, enjoying the rewards, I guess, of having a successful band and writing the kind of music you want to write, and people really loving your music. Okay, I'm just going to say a big thank you to everybody who's in our Zoom room here right now. Thank you guys for coming along and for asking the questions. I hope you found that a really useful hour of your time, and I hope you're all safe and well, and that this has been a kind of little oasis in your day. I'm going to say a big thank you also to our audience out there watching us streamed out on Facebook. Thank you to all of you and for your questions and for contributing to this session so actively. And to Matt Whittam, who has put all this together and has been kind of the producer and steering this conversation along very nicely. So thanks to Matt. And then, of course, finally to Chris Illingworth for taking the time to share his thoughts with us and his experiences, and for such an inspirational conversation there, Chris. We really, really appreciate your time. Good luck with the new album. We hope you guys get back out on the road soon. We'll all come up and see you when you do.
That'd be great. Yeah.
I know you're due in Manchester. I think it's in November, isn't it? So hopefully we can
Fingers crossed,
see that in some way, shape or form. But it's been amazing. Finally, you know, you've got these little reaction buttons on there. So I know we can't kind of cheer and do all that, but we can give Chris a virtual round of applause there. So thank you very much to Chris Illingworth.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
All right, guys. Thank you for your time. Stay safe. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you, Chris.
Bye.
Bye.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Chris. Fantastic. Cheers, Chris. Bye bye.
Nice one.